to the Gaming Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater alongside Richard A. the Cruz.
Welcome back.
And Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Good afternoon.
We're back after a week off. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse, Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse, where you can support us for $2, $4, $7, and $10 and get your name in the credits, early access to our videos, and access to our Discord server, more stuff like that. If you haven't checked out the latest video, part 2 of a retrospective on Splinter Cell, go check that one out. I like it. I think it turned out pretty good. Next video is in the works now. You can follow on Patreon to get updates on that. Not sure how far it'll be away. But yeah, 2 big games that we have played a lot of since our last discussion, or well, some of us have played a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield, which I think we'll have a hefty discussion about here. Richard, you said you have not been playing a ton of stuff, or you have?
No, I have been, just not the cool things.
Oh, okay. Tell us about the non-cool things.
He's not playing what's hip.
No, I'm not. Well, I'm not what's hip to everybody, but I guess the quickest I'll start off with Genshin Impact, because the 4.0 update.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't there a big update?
The 4.0 update came out, which introduces the new region of Fontaine, which is based off of France.
Yes.
And they state that Fontaine is the land of justice. So your character goes there and immediately encounters the Archon there, which is their gods of each region. And this god already is aware of your existence and already is kind of trying to press charges on you.
Hell yeah.
Right. And there are a lot of
Phoenix Wright real quick.
Yeah, right, just a little bit. Yeah, They state that the region has a ton of laws, some of which are very weird, but like if you follow them, you'll be A-okay. But if you bend the rules, you'll get charged and put on trial. The thing is, in this region, the trials are played out like dramas. People can attend, and they're played out as like kind of stage shows.
So I'm right to include Phoenix Wright in my defense.
Yes, yeah, just a little bit. So, of course, you do have, just like Phoenix Wright, you do get roped into everything. You become the attorney of someone who's being charged with murder.
Interesting.
And so you basically will now have to like search crime scenes and get clues and stuff, and then present that evidence and try to flip around.
Searching crime scenes, what attorneys do.
But it's I always found that funny.
I just hope there's a scene where an anime girl picks up something and just goes circumstantial.
That would be rad.
Takes a drag from cigarette.
You bring back Cole Phelps. The voice, I forget the actor's name. You bring him back for that one line, and it's just out of nowhere. Your anime girl character just goes circumstantial. What's it back out of nowhere? That'd be fantastic. Circumstantial.
Doodle someone's face.
But it's fun because they, all the viewpoints and comparisons to like what the real life locations are very cute, and I think it is fun how the audience kind of in some ways influences the outcome. There's a kind of like an
interesting.
There's kind of like an AI thing that listens to the testimonies and decides on its own, like if you're guilty or not guilty, and it delivers the verdict at the end. But it's always 100% correct. And of course, something not necessarily goes awry, but something happens later on and it gives a different verdict than the actual human who gives their verdict. There's a human who gives the verdict, and then there is the machine that gives the verdict.
Wow.
And they're always in tune. They're always 100% correct, but there's at one point it's different. So now things will go haywire on that. But the Archon, it's learning. The Archon seemingly gets off on the theatrics of everything.
This sounds like a Star Trek episode.
Yeah. So although the laws are intact and they follow the laws, they kind of like to play everything up to the audiences. Yeah. So so it's very fun. Beyond that, I went back into Final Fantasy 16.
Okay.
Because I dropped it for a bit. And I've had, I would say, probably a half month or a month off from that game. And I'm playing it now currently. And I will say this until I beat it and everything kind of comes together, but I think that Final Fantasy 16 probably will, I'm going to say will have to be one of my biggest disappointments of the year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I've done a complete like 180 of it.
Yeah, because you liked it.
I did, yeah. And I still do I like the main story, and I do like the gameplay of it all to a point. The problems I have with the game are extremely mundane side quest tasks, just like an MMO. Walked over here and I fucking dropped 3 ores. Like, can you go get them for me? Like, oh no, there's monsters surrounding those ores because they eat them or something. I don't know. And there's usages of characters that I think are very unfulfilling. Particularly one of the side female characters who has the opportunity to be a very good character. Something may come along by the time I beat the game, but she's kind of disappointing so far in her
portrayal.
Not only portrayal, but what she gives to the story and the game as well.
Okay.
The biggest problem I have is the Eidolon fights, the fights between the big
summons. Elemental, yeah.
By all accounts, should be very cool and very theatrical, but they come off as so incredibly boring when you're playing them, only because of the artificial inflation of the health that they have, or the damage that you do, or the arbitrary points of health that you're supposed to get them to before the next cinematic cutscene starts. And so the last one that I just did last night, by a large amount of time I was playing it, was not really looking at the screen.
Oh, wow.
Because it is you're not necessarily in danger. You're kind of just beating on this thing until you get that arbitrary point to where the next sequence happens. And then after what should be the ending of the battle, because of how much damage is done or how much, destruction is caused, it still continues on. I got to I think a third phase last night, and I was like, oh, cool, now we're done. Like a fourth section in, I paused my game, put my PS5 in rest mode, and went to sleep. Because I was just like, I'll come back to this later. Just because I know that feeling. That's a sucky feeling. It is, yeah. And if it was just a cutscene with maybe minimal, button presses for your QuickTime events, I would be a lot more into it. But because they force you to go through this long, drawn-out phase of mashing buttons, no good return as far as the feeling of the battle goes. It really brings it down a lot, especially when they kind of paint those as the big things of the game. It's still gorgeous. It's still fun to play when you're the action character or the main character. But yeah, the side quests are really boring, and the Eidolon fights are really boring as well. But I also have been playing Armored Core 6. Oh, okay, cool. That is one that I've been playing and I've been getting really into. I find it difficult to explain to people because I haven't decided yet on how good it is. It is good. I like the game a lot. But it is also not the game that I think people assume it is. And it is a game, it might as well be called Mech Builder Simulator, 2023. Because as fast and flashy the action is, you do have to... Your score in the mission is dictated on how much ammo you use, how much damage you take, and how fast you get it done. So a lot of stylistic points? Not stylistic points, just how efficient were you in this battle? Or more. But it's not a make or break for the level. You just won't get as much money back. Okay. But when you get to these points for the first act, all the missions are bite-sized. They can range anywhere from 30 seconds to maybe 3 minutes. That's how fast the missions are. Wow. Okay. And they're very nice, very, very quick, easy, and intense sometimes. But then you get to you maybe have been chattering about the first act boss. His name is Baltius. he is an incredibly difficult boss. And up until that point, the game is kind of not a cakewalk, but you can get through it just fine. As soon as you get to this boss, Baltius, it then becomes how well is your mech built to fight this guy? Do you have the right legs on you? Do you have the right arms that give you the correct, don't give you too much weight and make you faster at shooting your weapon? Like, what weapons do you have on you that will do the most effective damage to him? It then becomes not how good you are at the game, but how optimized your mech is.
Okay.
And some people have found ways to completely cheese the system, and some people have found ways to like just scrape by. But I fought this boss for about a week.
Wow.
And I barely beat him last night.
Holy cow.
But I do have a funny story about it, because I was fighting him about 2 nights ago, and I got to the game over screen. Thankfully, in the game over screen, if you find your build isn't right, you can go to your assembly real quick. It's like a quick loadout, and then let me change my shoulder weapons, let me change my whatever, and then get back into the battle from the last checkpoint. But I got to the game over screen, and I was like, I will come back to this. I didn't want to go through the mission again to get to him. Like, I'll leave off right at the start of him. So I came back last night about 1 a.m. and it was like, hey, while you're gone, there was an update. Like, you should probably install that. And I was like, no, because I'm here. I don't want to do the mission anymore. I'll just forego the update. It's like, okay, cool. We'll go to offline mode. Like, so you keep playing the game. We'll just go to offline mode. And I said, all right, fine. I beat him within 3 like tries.
Nice.
Yeah, it felt good. But anyways, I find out today that update nerf him. It was to buff other weapons and then also to nerf him and a couple other bosses later.
Ultimate irony.
Yeah. I'm fine with it, because I get to wear that, dumb badge of honor that, like,
sure,
because the same thing happened with Radon in Elden Ring. I beat him before the patch that made him easier, and it's like, all right,
see, I didn't give a shit because
sure.
I don't give a shit how difficult the Elden Ring bosses are or what the state of I was like, what's the easiest way to beat this bitch? Rot breath? Okay, how do I get rot breath? What do I do?
For sure.
I didn't give a shit about the patches. not that it's bad to give a shit about it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not bad. It's just with Armored Core, because it is a linear, mech title, I can't go anywhere else. I have to beat this guy to get to the next act. But I would say my biggest downside for Assassin's Creed, it's all AC now, so for Armored Core 6 is that the characters in the game don't have faces to them. And it doesn't matter. Like, that's kind of the point of it. Like, it doesn't matter. You're all mercenaries from 5 different companies trying to fight over this new resource. And a lot of the talking happens during the missions or during the fights. So when you're dodging, shooting, and trying to, like, survive, it's the people are talking to, and it's like I can't pay attention to the people talking to me. And it's like, so
sensory overload.
Yeah, a little bit. So I found myself, I don't want to say not caring about the story, but I don't know what's going on really, except for the base 5 mercenary groups are fighting over this, and something big happened during that Baltius fight. Somebody's in my mind now.
Okay.
And so I'm like, whoa. So,
well, it's a From Software game.
It's a From Software, yeah.
So are you really supposed to know the story?
No, not until I read a 32 part.
You're just searching for maidens. Searching for maidens. That's what you're still doing.
Yeah. I haven't read the endings, but the endings seem similar to Dark Souls as well. So we'll see.
Okay. All right, Connor, do you want to talk? So I've played more. I almost made you spit out your coffee.
No, I wasn't prepared to start talking, so I was like, sip.
Connor, drive a bus. Let's talk about Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes.
So I'm 120-ish hours in now. Still, I'm at the 3rd act, so I'm at Baldur's Gate now. And I still have a long way to go. The game's massive. There's one big gripe I have about the game that I really hate. I'll stay away from spoilers. But it does have to do with big plot points, but I won't spoil what exactly happens. But there are points in the game where characters will decide to do something, right? And these characters have story arcs where they learn and they grow. And this is communicated via lines of dialogue, plot points, things like that. There are moments in the game where suddenly a character will have to make a decision, and it comes down to a really high die roll, whether or not your character can persuade this character to do one thing or the other. And I hate that. I hate that with a passion, because that's not writing a character. That's disconnecting a character from a cohesive narrative and then bringing the result down to what is a completely random roll of the dice, which is not how human beings or sentient people interact, right? People don't, interact with each other by rolling dice and doing random behaviors.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think the story is sublime. The voice acting may be the very best voice acting I've ever seen in a game. This and Red Dead 2 are just... Do you know J.K. Simmons is in this?
No.
He plays one of the villains, yeah. I didn't know either, and then I kept listening to the villain's voice, and I was like, if he told me to get pictures of Spider-Man, he would sound like J.K. Simmons in IMDb, and I was like, son of a bitch, it's J.K. Simmons. No, but he's in it, he's great. Yeah, so like, I really hate that about Baldur's Gate. I ran into some other problems too, because Baldur's Gate it's this expansive story with all these little threads, and you never know when you're going to trip this thread or pull on that thread or unravel this thread, because there's just tripwire everywhere as far as story and trigger points and things like that, and you really never know. And sometimes you'll hit a few in quick succession, and you get into this weird situation where there wasn't an autosave, so you have to redo a boss fight or something like that. And that has really made me angry a few times. But I'm talking about the stuff that I dislike, because the first week or so of playing Baldur's Gate 3, I was still sort of figuring it out. But now that I'm much further in the game, and I have figured out more of it, I think it's just phenomenal. There's not a whole lot of, it's just really goddamn good. And I continue to appreciate the way that they wrote the characters. Not every character is a goody two-shoes, and you have to reconcile that somehow with your actions. I think a recurring theme of Baldur's Gate 3 is the pursuit of power. And I think this is true about almost every companion's quest line and the main quest line. It's all about the desire and the pursuit for major power. Is that good? Is that bad? And people in power, what do they do to maintain it? And what kind of forces do they put into motion? And what kind of violence or actions do they impose on other people to keep the power that they have? And so that makes it really interesting, because you are not somebody who is in necessarily a position of power, but because of your character's specific situation, you're in a situation where now you can sort of dictate how these big power players, where they go and stuff like that. So it's a really cool, really fun dynamic. Connor, go ahead if you want to bring up some stuff about the game.
It is very true. I've said this before. It is very true to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of it conveys over really well. There are some things that they have changed, some for the better. There's a popular homebrew for 5th edition that allows you to cast multiple spells per turn, because rules is written, not really allowed. But as long as, like what they have in Baldur's Gate, casting as a bonus action spell and an action spell can be cast in the same turn.
Yeah.
And this is for the better for Baldur's Gate. If you didn't have that, I think it would grind the fights down to a very slow pace.
Yeah, and it's more dynamic when you're able to, because there's a wide range of spells. Some of them are utility spells where you turn somebody invisible, or you can teleport somebody or whatever. And then others are just offensive spells where you're throwing a lightning bolt at somebody or whatever. And in combat, when you have those utility / support spells in combination with your offensive spells, and you're able to use them in tandem, that makes combat really dynamic and fun and tactical. So yeah, I would agree.
And for those of you listening who end up picking up the game and then look online for like party builds and stuff, ignore Reddit. Reddit does not understand this game or D&D or the class builds.
Okay.
I have it.
There is a very common thread along through a lot of conversations about the characters in Baldur's Gate 3 and the classes in Baldur's Gate 3 on Reddit for like party builds and stuff like that. And a lot of it is that clerics are next to useless because they don't do big healing.
Clerics?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly. You get it. Okay, you get it.
I mean, okay, go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
Well, the first thing to know is in Dungeons and Dragons, healing is meant just to keep people in the fight.
Mm.
You're not healing people to keep them topped up. When they go down, you heal them to bring them back into the fight.
Yeah.
That's when it's used. If they're close and they're going to be attacked and you want to get an attack in before they go down, you heal them then. Healing is situational. It's not the cleric is not a healer.
Now,
the cleric is a controlling support class.
Yeah, and obviously they have turn undead and a lot of stuff with undead. Is there, because one of the reasons I picked Sorcerer in Baldur's Gate 3 is because in like Pillars of Eternity, I always make like a priest or a sorcerer because then the character that I control, I'll do all the buffs, I'll do all the healing, and I'll find the frontline fighters and I'll manage them that way. Is there really like a healing class in Baldur's Gate? Because it feels like there isn't a class that has a specific...
The hyper specific healing class, and this is true for D&D or tabletop D&D as well, is the life domain cleric.
Okay.
If you just want to do
cleric.
Best possible healing you can, it is that. And it's not in Baldur's Gate 3, but you could also do a Divine Soul Sorcerer.
Okay.
Those are the two that are like the most optimized healing builds.
Okay.
But yeah, other changes they've made. Cloud of Daggers is far more useful in Baldur's Gate 3 than it is in Dungeons and Dragons. It is a large spell now.
Yeah, that's a mean spell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My partner and I, we just cleared out the goblin encampment in the first act. And we found when fighting through there, we had a choke point that was gonna get flanked. So I just dropped Cloud of Daggers at the door while we were fighting everyone else, and the goblins that ran through there all died as they entered. It was this week's episode of Will It Blend?
From the goblins'
point of view, was goblins. The answer is yes, they will.
From the goblins' point of view, the movie just starts and they're in a mic boat and they're next to Tom Hanks. He's like, port side stick, starboard side stick, move fast to clear those murder holes. Tom Sizemore shows up out of nowhere. He's got like a war axe. I want plenty of room between goblins. Anyway, sorry. That sounds awesome. That's funny. That's cool. Yeah. Little tactical. Yeah. One thing Baldur's Gate 3 has done an amazing job at is it feels like it's insane because it feels like every section of combat takes place in a arena or in a spot on a map where there's all kinds of dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
There's high points, there's low points, there's maybe a little bit of water over here, there's maybe a pit over here, there's so many different... It could have been so easy to have boss fights take place on a circle, and it's like, oh, well, this character's not going to be able to get advantage for their bow because you can't get at a higher elevation or whatever. But it's just like every fight that takes place, it seems like they had one team that was like, okay, we're going to put a pillar here, we're going to put a building with a roof over here, and they made every fight dynamic that way.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because in the Goblin encampment, we found ladders that led up to rafters above one of the bosses.
Yeah.
So we took Will and just stuck him up there, where he had a view of everything, and we just had a sniper on the rooftop.
Yeah, you got it. That's playing a dangerous game though, because you get shoved, and Will
no
dies.
one was making it up to him because the second they got up the ladder, he shot them with Eldritch Blast with repelling blast and knocked them off.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, that's cool.
It was so much fun. The Goblin encampment is a really well crafted battlefield.
Yep.
If you end up fighting them.
Yeah, and there's so much in the game. Yeah, it's insane. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's anything else I want to say about it. I've had so much fun. There are entire classes I haven't, like, because there's no paladin in the game.
Correct.
Shadowheart's a cleric, which, by the way, Shadowheart has saved my ass so many times.
There is a lot of complaints about, like, that people are saying just respect Shadowheart because they don't understand how to use the trickster domain abilities.
Yeah, and like
because she is pure support.
Oh
the
my
trickster
God.
is pure support. You drop your invoke duplicity near your fighter. You drop them in the middle of combat, and people will try to go attack it, and you send your fighter in there, and it gets advantage from every enemy in there. And your fighter's just scoring crit after crit after crit. Or you send in Karlach, and she crit.
Or you cast Mirror Image on Shadowheart, and Shadowheart will take, she won't tank, technically, because she's not taking damage, but she'll sit there, and an enemy will be occupied with attacking her because she's got the Mirror Image, and you'll go like 3 rounds, and that enemy will just take a ghost away. So
I can't remember off the top of my head. You might. And I don't, because it's not in 5th edition, but is Mirror Image a concentration spell?
I'm going to say yes, because if you cast other concentrations...
It drops it.
You know what? I don't know, actually.
Because...
that may be wrong.
The best use of Mirror Image would be casted on herself and then cast Sanctuary on her.
Yeah, I don't know that... It may be a concentration spell.
Okay, because Mirror Image is fairly busted in 5th edition because it's not a concentration spell.
Oh, okay. So you can just do crazy shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna. Oh, so like, there's other classes that I haven't even encountered. And maybe it's because I haven't encountered the characters in the game that play them. But like, I haven't even touched Bard.
There isn't a Bard you can pick up outside of talking to Withers.
Withers.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a Paladin. I haven't seen a Ranger. So there's all kinds of classes that have these dynamics that I don't even know exist because because there's no like pre-made character. You can hire, quote unquote, the hirelings, and you can. So if you need a Bard, I did hire a Bard at one point. I thought it might help with something, but so the amount of depth there is crazy, and I think it may have helped that partially the game was not made for them, but they had sort of a starting point with D&D 5th edition. Okay, is there anything else? Because I want to get to Starfield.
Sorry, just real quick. I am playing a Bard, and the greatest thing you can do as a Bard is after you've taken your action, your bonus action, after you've done movement, you click. You go to start playing music, and you just play music in the middle of the fight. It makes no sense whatsoever.
That's so awesome. That's
What's 6 seconds?
Yeah, right. It's so awesome, and that kind of stuff makes me want to play as a Bard because it just seems like so much fun.
And Vicious Mockery is so good in Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh my God, yes.
For this one insult that my Bard yelled out. And they said, "What? Were you betrothed by your mother? Did your mom buy you those clothes?" And it killed someone.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I have Will, my warlock, has that spell, and it's one of those things that it's hilarious because you'll be facing down some like otherworldly monster. And yeah, Will's like, your mom goes to college, and the monster just is crippled by this insult. Starts sobbing. Yeah, it's like you'll see a demon go into like the sob animation. It's so hilarious. Yeah,
and then if you're in town and you're playing as a Bard, people will gather around. But it's so hilarious because you'll have like conversation with people like super depressed and something, and then you start playing music and they're like yeah. Yeah. And then you stop and they go back to being depressed.
I figured you could do that for distractions.
Oh, you can? Yeah.
Yeah, because it
absolutely.
Yeah, so you can play and then you can switch to a rogue or whatever and sneak into... Yeah, that game's so freaking good. What was it? Oh, another thing. So one other thing that they did such a good job with, maybe we can skip Starfield and talk about it next week.
I'll have more to talk about Starfield for next week.
Okay. I think one other thing that Larian did a really good job of is fights will feel insurmountable.
Yes.
You'll get into a boss fight and it's just like, holy shit. Like there's a boss fight where you fight a necromancer and it's just him and you're like, bring it on, bitch. And he's like, okay. And then all of a sudden it's just skeleton. And then there's just skeletons
scary
everywhere. And you're like, how the hell am I going to do this? But if you remember your spells, if you move correctly, it's like you'll be surprised all the different ways you can fight that. And if you have Shadowheart, because skeletons are undead,
Turn undead,
you just run her into the middle of a group of skeletons, turn undead, and she just massacres entire generations of those things, just completely gone, because she just turns undead.
Not only the men, but the women
and the children too. Yeah, the skeletons are destroyed.
That's awesome, because I keep forgetting JRPGs, Japanese RPGs, the basis of those D&D.
Oh, really?
And so,
okay.
yeah. So I think like one of the most famous spells in Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy is Esuna. Esuna, if you were to take how like you would say it in Japanese, Esuna, it's SN, status null.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So they have things like that. Like if you fight an undead monster, like a zombie or something, you throw them a potion, if you give them a potion.
See, that's something that's lacking from 5th edition that I wish stayed, is healing the undead kills them.
Yeah, and it kills them immediately. So it's cool. Like, it's like, wow, okay, that's kind of also an obvious idea, is give the life to something that doesn't have life and it like cancels each other out.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But it's great to know that, something like turn undead to undead just immediately obliterates them.
Yeah, there's so much stuff you can do in the game. A lot of it that I haven't even realized, but you don't throw potions at a person. You want to throw it in combat. If they don't have a potion, you need to heal them. You just throw it at the ground next to them.
Yeah,
because if it hits the ground, it'll splash on them and it'll heal.
Yeah.
Or if your entire group needs healing and you only have a few potions, just bring everybody into a circle, throw it in the middle, it'll splash and it'll get everybody. I've healed.
Or have Karlach pick up the corpse of the person she just killed and have her throw it at someone.
Will that heal?
No, but it deals damage.
Oh yeah, it does. I was gonna say that heals. No, it does damage. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Yeah, I have and I picked up a spell where it's just a telekinesis, where you just throw somebody, and oh my god, it's the game. The combat has a dynamic soundtrack, so it's like you'll hear ba 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 in the combat, and when you take out a powerful enemy, the theme will kick in. So it would be like, so it's like you kill an enemy and it's just like, ba, 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 da, 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 na, na, and it's like energizing and cool. But man, I used this telekinesis spell in this super difficult fight, and this enemy had like 125 health and just off a cliff. See you next time. You're smelly. Bye-bye. And it was just done like that. So freaking satisfying. If you like... You really get rewarded for picking spells that don't seem all that useful, and you really get rewarded for
creativity,
thinking of creative ways to use those spells, which is cool. Baldur's Gate 3 is phenomenal. We can talk about Starfield next week.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it. It's weird as hell. Do you have a sentence you want to say?
The game needs local maps for being in settlements.
Jesus, yes.
For being an established world-made or pre-made settlements.
Richard, would you believe that in 2023,
yes,
there is a Bethesda RPG where you go to cities and there's not a map of that city, where it's like, go to Ted's Guns, and it's like, okay, where is it? And when you open up the map, it's just a map of like the kilometer by kilometer square of land you're in, and not a single point that says Ted's Guns over here, like in every other Bethesda RPG ever made, but not in Starfield. Would you believe that?
Do it for me, fix it for me. That's what you sound like right now.
Whoa, you're gonna take a whole
No, it's just a quote that came into my head from another show I've seen. But no, that's. I wonder if Bethesda was trying to be like, we want people to find it on their own.
Helpful with that, if they didn't want to make like weird, because yes, it is very thematic, the mapping system you get for the location, but when you're in a settlement, settlements could also have diegetic maps, like you are here.
I have a diegetic map on my phone. If you tell me to go to Ted's Guns here, I'll be able to find it. I don't know if there is one.
In the year of our Lord 2023.
In the year of our Lord 2023. May the Lord anoint this hallowed field of battle. Okay, are we
give me your soul.
Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server. Okay, so we're getting into this Starfield review controversy.
I thought you said we were going to talk about Starfield next week.
Whatever. Well, I guess we cancel the show now. Okay, so access to Starfield Reviews was weirdly restricted in the UK. As far as I know, the first person to, I guess, report on this was Eurogamer's Tom Phillips. Phillips wrote a piece saying why Eurogamer's review for Starfield was going to be late. This is a few days before its, I believe it's a few days before its early access launch. It kind of happened a while ago. Strangely enough, Digital Foundry got a review code, but Eurogamer was told they could not share that code. Seemed like there was some miscommunication between the two sides. Mm-hmm. Digital Foundry is like a part of Eurogamer, but I guess they're based in the US, or they have a branch. They have a branch in the US. Okay.
And I think their US offices contacted Bethesda, got the code for that.
Yeah, so there's different regions going on here. But anyway, an hour after that write-up that Tom Phillips posted, Bethesda provided Eurogamer with a code. That was just something weird, something strange. And Bethesda, it's not the first time that they've done like weird review shenanigans. But I wanted to read something just on a broader scale about games media. Over the past couple of weeks, we've talked about like the state of games journalism or the state of games media, what have you. And Brendan Sinclair wrote this piece about sort of the state of games journalism. And I wanted to, it's a little long, but I thought it was kind of saying everything exactly, hitting the nail on the head. Quote, games media of gamesindustry.biz, Brendan Sinclair. Quote, games media is now overly dependent on hit games coming out, on writing walkthroughs and guides for those games, and on gaming the system with the right combination of keywords and SEO best practices to be lucky enough for Google to direct readers our way. And that process is less about communicating information to another person clearly and concisely, and more like performing spatulamancy to understand the whims of an uncaring and unresponsive God. Instead of focusing on delivering insightful analysis and interpretation, on expressive writing that showcases expertise and unique perspectives, or rigorous reporting to make clear the facts of an industry obsessed with obfuscation, games journalism has spent decades living hand to mouth, chasing whatever payday will keep the lights on in the near term, even as it makes us less relevant and easier to replace in the long run. End quote. He was talking about that in relation to Eurogamer not getting in other UK outlets, not getting a Starfield review code, because review codes are important, but reviews are important, but sort of guides and walkthroughs are, as far as like the balance sheet goes, are going to be more important because it drives more traffic, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so I thought that quote by Sinclair was 1,000,000,000% correct, and it's basically the only thing that ever needs to be said, almost, because it's spot on. There are other problems, some that I would like to talk about, but yeah, and I don't think Bethesda was acting maliciously. I think
No, I don't think so. But they are known to be a little like coy when it comes to providing things like that. At least since the early 2010s. What was the game that did that in, particularly with Kotaku?
I don't remember which one it was with Kotaku, but Kotaku has famously been blacklisted by Bethesda and
Nintendo.
Nobody knows why. And Nintendo as well.
Yeah, I think Nintendo as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and I'm probably wrong about that, but
being blacklisted should be a badge of honor.
Yeah.
If a PR rep decides that they can't talk to you anymore, that means you probably said something that's good, not something that you should be.
I'd say most of the time, yeah.
Okay, most of the time, yes. Maybe not across all industries, but I'd say as far as games industry goes, it's probably most of the time fine. Sorry, thoughts, opinions
about that quote. The spatula mancer is going to be my next Baldur's Gate character.
Spatula mancer.
Did we have anything we wanted to say?
Like about the state of like journalism?
Yeah.
It's I don't know if it's a consequence with how fast and easy it is to access information. And also with particular like rise of, I find publications are probably harder to keep up and running when you have some person on TikTok or on Twitter who you can pay $100 to be like, this game is cool.
Yeah.
And they have 500,000 followers, 1 million followers. Because it seems like nowadays reviews still matter, but now they're weaponized. Reviews are weaponized nowadays. Well, they've always have been kind of, but I mean,
by whom do you think?
by the vocal majority or vocal minority.
So not by the people that necessarily write them, but
right.
by
by audio.
It's like cultural cudgels.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And now now I lost my train of thought. I forgot where I was going with this.
You were saying that reviews are weaponized.
Yes.
Which I think is right.
And so now I think that they are leaned on a lot less. People have already decided if they're going to buy a game or not. And people's minds can easily be swayed. Like, it's been 2 years now, and look at the state of like Cyberpunk 2077. People bought that in droves. Terrible game. On release, it did get improved way later, and it has another huge improvement coming this month.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's going to be big again. So for reviews, what I'm sure a lot of publications, or at least the people who run them, are kind of probably asking themselves, what's the point? There are still going to be reviews. I'm not saying they're going to go away, but
sure, being
a games journalist is very hard when there are other easier ways to manipulate, but other ways to get the word out.
Yeah,
and take advantage of just because of the way the internet culture is, and all the ways we can access information.
Yeah.
So it's just going to get harder and harder for those who want to take this seriously and who want to not make video games seem like the lowest common denominator when it comes to, as a whole. Still, we talked about it before, video games are still seen as infantile or, a waste of time.
Yeah.
And not seen as great storytelling pieces, great,
or on par with movies or what have you. Yeah, I would agree.
Some of the most athletic people are, play games. Just go to an arcade and watch somebody play DDR,
Sure. I would agree with you there. I think it's exhausting how much and maybe it's only exhausting because I imagine it being exhausting in my head. But like, as soon as I saw Starfield getting 7s, I was just like, aw shit, here we go again. Because here's one somewhat petty example. So one reason I can't go on social media is because if I see some crazy like political person say something that is just patently ridiculous, my first thought is always, what's the rest of the context of this? If someone's like, polar bears carry the gay virus, it's like, okay, so clearly that's not true. Clearly it's homophobic, but like, what's the context here? Why are you saying this? Who are you? Who do you work for? Like, my brain just gets filled with questions. And then, like a Star Trek episode, I just shut down, like Spock saying creativity is for the health of the body. And then, I'm just down. So it's like, I can't look at things. So when I see like, conversations about game scores and things like that, it's like, is any of this really constructive? Is any of this getting anywhere? Or is it just recycled arguments and people responding to internet drivel? And it's really not criticism or discussion. It's just a lot of like useless nothing arguments. And so I can't go on the internet. I don't know why I was saying any of that. Sorry, because you were talking about how people like weaponize reviews and things like that. And I was going to say a petty example of it is, I remember after Starfield came out, on the Starfield subreddit, there was a screen cap of the user reviews on Steam, and it said very positive.
Yeah.
And the person circled it, and then the title of this post on the subreddit was, "It turns out players actually do know what they want in their game." And it had like 18,000 upvotes. And so again, in my mind, I'm like, so hold on. So who said that they don't? What is being very positive on Steam proof of? Because I could point out a lot of games that have very positive reviews on Steam that a lot of people don't have great opinions of. And it's just like, so what is the statement here? What does this say? Is this a useful bit of criticism? Is this a useful build of community building? And of course the answer to all of those is no. because it's not a discussion about like reviews or games media. The purpose of a review, I think, is really interesting because, the way games are today, it's like there's so many people play games. There's a huge swath of people that are going to buy a game and play it no matter the reviews.
Right.
I was going to buy and play Star Wars Squadrons even if it got 6 and 7s because I wanted to play it for myself.
You know that means it's good, right?
And it was only, and that's the other thing. It's like what does a number mean? And that's a whole other debate. But even if it got bad reviews, there, I'll say that. It maybe not terrible reviews though. So it's like people make up decisions before. But that's only if you view reviews as this like commercial this not gatekeeping, but like this commercial public service, right? Which I think is a very, not necessarily antiquated, but sort of like an old way of looking at reviews, right? Is here's this thing that came out, here's information about it, so you can make an informed purchase as a consumer. I think that's kind of an old way of looking at it. But criticism is different. Because criticism is this wide-ranging field of looking at art and evaluating it. And if you have to inject in there, here's how much it costs, should you buy it, you have to inject a commercial angle in there, then that's fine. But people aren't looking for that when a game comes out. When Starfield comes out, people don't want to know about, like, are they really looking for an academic or not even academic, but just some kind of critical analysis? I'm sure there are a lot of people that are, but I also think there are a lot of people that are like, I'm going to drop $70 on this. Is it a pile of crap or is it playable? Just yes or no.
Yeah.
And if they just see a bunch of, yeah, sure, whatever, cool, yeah, cool. They're like, all right, I'm going to drop $70, right? And that's not necessarily wrong. So figuring that out, I think, is difficult for an outlet. But now I'm rambling because to get back to this, I do think that what Sinclair mentions with SEO is really important because it's 100% true. And I think that has partially ruined the large swaths of the internet. How many times do you Google something for a game, a bug, or you're looking for something that's really specific in a quest, and you Google your problem and then you add Reddit at the end?
Yeah.
Because if you just Google the problem, you're going to get like gamersgg.net and it's going to be like this game, and there's going to my grandma made this recipe, right. And you just have to scroll down 8 times before you find the actual problem. And that's an SEO induced problem, and that's a website that is manipulating the data in order to appear higher in the search so that it draws in more traffic. And fixing the problem that you search for is 18th on that list of things for that article existing. But if you tag Reddit at the end of a Google search, then you will find, oh, look at that, 20 people have the same problem. Oh, and look at that, I click on it and the top comment is how to solve it. Thank God, and so your problem gets solved right away. And that's a problem. And I don't know what the solution is. I think partially the solution is, if you're an outlet, you have to figure out how to not be so beholden to SEO and bullshit like that. And that's tricky because if you are owned by, Geo Media, let's say, Geo Media doesn't give a shit. That's their goal. So we have to figure out a way to divorce the content from capital, from investment, from financial sector douchebags, from the Jared Vanetts of the world. We have to figure out how to separate that. One way is content creation. One way is doing what we're doing. The problem is there's no money to be had, and you have to garner an audience somehow. Yeah. So it's incredibly difficult. So there's issues right there. And even if you do this, you are still beholden to the same God, because you're still beholden to YouTube, and who knows how that's going to turn out, or how that works out for you. And that's too bad. So, but I still think you have to somehow separate yourself from big business, because big business is not in the business of creating quality content that's going to engage on meaningful levels with video games, right? So you have to figure out how you can get there, and there is no easy way, especially for these websites that that focus so much on traffic. And if you are those websites, I think you just have to own it. Don't, if you put out job applications for writers, don't pretend that you're putting out applications to write for ProPublica, or you're putting out applications because you're going to cover a famine somewhere in the world as a writer for the Associated Press. Just be honest, and don't act like your outlet is some bastion of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein Watergate Discovery glory, because it's just not. So drop the act, and then go from there and build your outlet honestly, and without like this need to somehow paint yourself as something that you're not, which is like content farming and shit like that. But anyway, do we have any other thoughts? I'm sorry.
No,
I think you
right.
put it fairly well.
Yeah, and I have a lot of opinions on this. I went to school for journalism. I believe in journalism. I also believe that people have always had unrealistic expectations, right? People act like there was this time where Walter Cronkite, was just this, you could just trust anything that was on the news. But people don't remember that it's like, Joseph McCarthy fucking controlled the media during the 50s and during the 50s with like Red Scare, right? Mm-hmm. Entire swaths of the media were beholden to, if we don't say this, people are going to accuse us of being communists, and before that you had the penny papers in New York and shit like that. So there's never been this like long legacy of media in the world or in the United States that has been like this upstanding, journalists pursuing the truth. There's never been like this, an era where it was like that for 40 years and all of a sudden it became bad. And people act like that's the truth, and it's just not. And part of the reasons that's not the truth is because that's not what people really want. And I get angry sometimes when people act like, when people are self-righteous and they complain about the media, right?
Yeah.
People complain about the media. Meanwhile, Fox News makes $1 trillion a year and has this huge viewer base. And it's like, well, apparently people love having shit shoved down their eyeballs every day because that's what happens at that station. So it's like, what do you want? Do you want good coverage? Do you want quote unquote unbiased news coverage? Or do you want things that affirm your personally held beliefs that you have for really no reason, so you can go to church the next day or go to work the next day and feel good about yourself? Because one of the dirtiest American secrets is that that's the thing that most people want. Because if you really want hardcore journalism, it's boring, it's long, it's good, but it's not going to be exciting. So anyway, that's a different rant for, I guess, a different day.
So you mean to tell me that there wasn't a point in time where you could trust your local anchorman? So the intro to Anchorman is a lie.
The intro to Anchorman is a lie.
God damn it, Tyler.
Sorry, Ron Burgundy was not. Well, that's the point. That's the point of that scene.
I know.
What is? I'm sorry. I know everyone in the world gets this, but that's the juxtaposition in that opening scene. This big opening, right? Brian Fantana, no stickball playing, Champ Kine was sports, all that. And then it goes into...
It was Champ Kine playing stickball. It was Brian Fantana sitting next to the burning fire with the other...
Oh, no, you're correct.
Yeah.
I apologize. I will commit seppuku after this.
I know my Anchorman lore, all right?
No, but... but
I was there when it was written.
Don't quote the old magics to me, witch. I was there when it was written.
But anyway... But what does that beginning of Anchorman go? It's this like the newsman. People believed what he said on TV, and then it cuts to a La Jolla man clings to life today after he was bit by rabid dogs in an abandoned pool. like just this nonsense news story about this random like accident that happens in this obscure place, like something completely meaningless, right? And that's the brilliance of the opening of that movie. And then he goes into Nutty the Squirrel on the. Oh yes, yeah. The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. Okay, look at me. I think we. I think we're good. Can we? We have a sounder. Do we not have that sounder on the?
No, it's not. It's not linked up right now.
We only have so many squares.
That one and the liberal media one.
Do we? We don't have it anymore.
No, we have it. It's just not linked to one of our buttons.
Son of a bitch! That's such a good one.
I know.
Okay.
I'll fix that after. They'll play.
The liberal media.
All right, let's talk about this other story. Brendan Sinclair is also bringing us this quote. Basically, speaking of media, we're just plagiarizing Brendan Sinclair at this point. Now we're quoting him. Come on. So thank you, Brendan. Speaking at the Goldman Sorry.
Hit us up for an interview.
If you were to come up with just the douchebaggiest conference name.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's Goldman Sachs Communicopia plus Technology Conference.
Rolls off the tongue.
Which is just like, there's not too much you could do. It's like the Skeletor and Hitler meeting of evil people at a teleconference group, you know. Yeah. Meanwhile, anyway, EA CEO Andrew Wilson said, quote, "If you fast forward 10 years, there's probably going to be a dozen, maybe 24 of these massive communities. There are 100 or 200 million plus communities." Talking about people, there can only be so many. We are very blessed that we have FC, we have Madden, we have Battlefield, we have The Sims, we have Apex. We're building out Skate. So we're going to disproportionately invest in IP as a platform and really creating the new world that is the flywheel of engagement. 50 years ago, it was about cruise lines and hotels. Today, it's about play, watch, create, connect around these massive online communities in the context of these extraordinary IP. We've been in football now for 30 years. We'll be in it for another 30 at least. I do think the likes of The Sims and Apex and Battlefield will spawn universes and ecosystems in the same way Star Wars and Marvel have. I do believe that's going to happen, and it's not hard to get there when you think there's 170 or 200 million people engaging with it daily. Okay.
I'm sorry, but The Sims will never spawn a universe like Star Wars. That is a terrible example.
So,
I know there are people who speak Simlish.
Yeah.
But there is no cohesive Sims universe to make a Star Wars-like universe off of it.
No, because you make it all. It's not a...
Yeah, so we've talked about this in the past with with live service games. There are only so many people on the planet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
7 billion to be exact.
So what is your... So even if you reached that, eventually you were going to run out of market, right? Unless 8 billion. Okay, Connor Googled it. Unless
well, what's a billion,
Yeah, a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's like half of India, a huge amount of people.
It's a lot more than you think.
So what was I going to say? Unless somebody invents AI to just AIs that go on to just make consumer purchases, which is a good idea for a dystopian novel, actually. There's a market cap, and I think it's interesting that he outright says it these are massive communities, so you're only going to have so much, so we can't grow that much, because Mm-hmm. But I guess what bothered me most about this quote is this capital optimization, where everything has to be funneled and finely tuned into these sectors, and it's all about efficiency. Mm-hmm. and nothing is about creativity or innovation or any of that shit. I'm sure he thinks those go hand in hand, but he's also a moron, so his opinion doesn't count in that matter. But it's just so corporate and so undyingly exhausting, especially when you're talking about Apex and Battlefield, as if they'll be as big as Star Wars or Marvel, and I don't know, maybe they will. But it's just is that what you want out of Battlefield? Is that what anyone wants out of Battlefield? It's so frustrating because there's this game that came out this year. I think it may have came out last year, called BattleBit. Have you guys seen it?
Yeah. It was this year.
It just looks like BattleBit. It's Battlefield Roblox, right? It has a Roblox aesthetic, and it's Battlefield. And it's really goddamn good. It's a shooter, real basic shooter. Everything works. It's a lot of fun, and it's just Battlefield, and it's super popular. And it's who would have known that just making a Battlefield game would be so popular without all this other shit that nobody wants?
You know who would have thought about that? EA 20 years ago when they were making good Battlefield games.
And I guess it's and you would think in this day and age when everything's games are too expensive nowadays, so we're going to have to either, eat a continent or we don't have video games anymore. It's well, why not just set expectations more reasonably? Why not just make a Battlefield that people want that isn't so worried about monetization tails and shit like that. And when you have these CEOs that are up there talking about Battlefield as if it's going to have any sort of this large market share that Marvel or Star Wars has, these huge cultural like pillars, not that they're necessarily quality pillars in every sense, but huge cultural pillars. And it's just like, you really think I don't know, it's just, it comes across so bullshitty.
Mm-hmm.
It comes across like the people that he's talking to clearly have never played Battlefield. And they don't know the video game market, and they don't understand games. Mm-hmm. But they're the CEO of some stupid fucking tech company, and so this is just getting spat at them from a robot, and then they go home and whatever.
EA had a universe that could have blown up into something larger that wasn't tied to a pre-existing IP.
Plants vs. Zombies.
Yeah, no.
Oh, sorry, Peggle.
Stop being funny, David.
Sorry, Bejeweled. Jesus.
Thank you, finally. No, and I've talked about the last couple podcasts, I have been replaying through Mass Effect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They fumbled that so hard.
Mass Effect fans are hardcore, man. Like,
this is my 6th playthrough of Mass Effect.
Yeah, you're right. And the reason behind Andromeda's failures are multifaceted,
Mm-hmm.
Frostbite engine, shit like that. But
I think one of the biggest ones that doesn't really get talked about for why Mass Effect Andromeda doesn't work is who gives a fuck about Andromeda in Mass Effect. Mass Effect is about humanity surviving an apocalypse.
Yeah. In the first trilogy.
You leave the apocalypse. Congratulations, you've beat the main bad guy of your game. Now what? Now you have to invent new things to fight. You have something good. Stick with it. You can make smaller stories within that universe.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
And I think but as far as like the corporate decision making at EA, because yes, you can't point the finger at Andrew Wilson and say Andromeda was your fault.
No, I'm going to.
It's more nuanced than that. But like Frostbite, remember when Jason Schreier wrote that story about Anthem, right? It was like this idea that everybody needed to move to Frostbite and figure out how to use Frostbite and all the problems that brought along with it. And it was like, okay, well, who's making this decision then? Yeah. And why is this decision being made? Yeah. And it had to do with like they don't want to pay licensing fees. They want to optimize this, and that. Some of them are reasonable answers. Some of them are just corporate bullshit. And so it's like that's a problem that you may not be able to draw a straight line to Andrew Wilson, but you can draw a straight line to upper management and other executive positions and people like that. You mentioned, you know what? And another thing that bothers the shit out of me about this quote is who had the Star Wars license for 5 years, 6 years, right? And did nothing with it. Like Electronic Arts, and they had it when there
was nothing like
the movies were in the future.
Right.
They had it at a moment. If you had to pick a moment in the past 20 years to have the Star Wars license, there were 2 times you would want it: 1999 and fucking 2015.
And they capitalized on the 1999 one. I mean, they had like Jedi Power Battles and the Phantom Menace game, and then of course the Revenge of the Sith,
and then the Battlefronts, the original Battlefronts,
the Clone Wars. I mean, they're. I'm not going to point to them and say that they're the best Star Wars games in it, but I greatly enjoyed like Power Battles. A lot of people really enjoy Revenge of the Sith on PS2 and Xbox, and Clone Wars is pretty solid. Obviously, the Battlefronts, 1 and 2. So,
Battlefront,
and they did nothing with it, and so it's so infuriating to hear the CEO of. It's like imagine, I don't know. It's so infuriating to have a CEO who had a pile of gold and then did nothing with the gold and then shoved the gold into a volcano. And then 2 years later is like, see this?
Wish I had some gold right now.
See this pile of silver I have over here? In 30 years, that's going to be a pile of gold. Let me tell you.
It's the Eric Andre shooting Hannibal meme.
Yeah.
It's just so infuriating.
Why would they do
and
this?
it's also moments like this where it's like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to say it. I could be the CEO of EA and I could do a better job than Andrew Wilson. Don't give a shit. I probably could.
Again,
I don't know.
No. I stand by my point that being CEO is not a difficult job. Because if you can be, and this, again, I'm making the Elon Musk argument. If you can be the CEO of 3 different companies at the same time, it is not a difficult job.
But even then, it's like, you had the Star Wars license, dude. Andrew, you had it.
You had
and
it.
your company butt fumbled it. So it's like, what the fuck? You know,
Get someone that can do the job
But of
right.
course, he's talking about this at the credit default swap crash the economy teleconference, review at San Francisco Bay Harbor. So none of these, vest wearing,
Brought to you by Monster.
Cornell going fucking douchebags have any idea what Battlefield is. But anyway, okay. Are we good for tidbits?
I mean, we can. I never said a thing, but.
Sorry, you can now. You didn't give off the Richard vibes that you had a point to make.
Well, everybody was talking. I was letting them talk. I'm sorry.
You were letting us ride.
Yeah, no, it was good.
Okay.
I think that Andrew Wilson has he vastly underestimates how many ADHD people are alive nowadays, and that communities don't last, man. Like, people jump ship to ship so quickly nowadays. There's always something new on the horizon to go towards. I mean, you could argue Baldur's Gate 3 is next, or Baldur's Gate series is next, and they have admittedly the benefit of COVID to ride on that. COVID, that's when D&D like exploded, because everybody wanted something to do together with their friends. It's we'll hang out, do that. Yeah. So, but it's so weird. Like, I hate seeing him say something like, the likes of Sims, Apex, and Battlefield specifically will spawn universes. Battlefield's been around for 23 years.
Yeah.
It did have 2 different universes. Like, it had a Battlefield universe, which they tried to Call of Duty-fy, and they doesn't work. Battlefield is not Call of Duty. It never will be. You can't create characters for a Battlefield story. Battlefield is all about being your own soldier.
Yes.
In these very large scale battles. Like, and you have Battlefield is like the Forza Horizon of like military shooters.
I will argue that you're not fully correct, because Battlefield Bad Company.
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I wasn't.
Okay. I'll hold off. I'll hold off.
I was saying that if they did want it, Battlefield Bad Company was the universe to make that.
That's a really good point.
That also has the benefit of approaching the Battlefield genre in a humorous way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you take something that's so serious and manly as, like, war and shooting, and just spin it into just goofballs saving the world,
then it works.
It works. It's so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, you're right.
And they've I think we all three, I know I have been begging for Bad Company 3 for years.
It would be.
I think out of all the Battlefield games, Bad Company 2 is probably my most played.
Yeah.
Because the Battlefield and Bad Company series, like I said, is like Forza Horizon of the military shooter world. It is casual enough for people to just kind of jump in and play, but if you really want to go that extra mile with your customization, or how you flying a helicopter is hard as hell. You have that as well.
Yep.
And so that's something else that they dropped.
It's been 13 years since Bad Company 2 came out.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yuck.
Still, one of my favorite lines from a video game ever is when they're in the helicopter pilot and he drops like his glasses and he just says the line, "Fucking Tuesdays, man." I don't know why. It always just makes me laugh thinking about it years later. They're in this helicopter with this stoner pilot. He's like,
Brochachos.
fucking Tuesdays, man. Anyway, okay, are we ready for tidbits now?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. What if I told you, in this world, there are bits and there are tids, and Richard is the only man who can put them together into tidbits?
I think we'll ever add like a as the signifier of like two things being put together.
Maybe we could take the Carl's Stone Cold Lock of the Century of the week. Sorry.
I got a couple tidbits that are a week or two old because I wasn't here for about 2 weeks, but we'll start off if we haven't talked about it. Denuvo security is now being used on Nintendo Switch. Denuvo is offering Switch emulation protection to developers saying it's a revolutionary technology to protect games launching on Nintendo Switch from piracy. According to them, the new tech can be applied to Switch games to block the ability to play Switch games on PC emulators. Denuvo says even if a game is protected against piracy on its PC version, the version released on Nintendo Switch can be emulated from day one and played on PC, therefore bypassing the strong protections offered on the PC version. This can happen with any of the numerous games available on Nintendo Switch. By blocking unauthorized emulations on PC, studios are able to increase blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Sorry, you can keep reading. I was just whatever.
Able to increase their revenue during the game launch window, which is the most important period for monetization. Nintendo Switch emulator protection will ensure that anyone wishing to play the game has to buy a legitimate copy. As with all other Denuvo solutions, the technology integrates seamlessly into the build toolchain with no impact on the game experience.
Yeah, okay.
And then allows for the insertion of checks into the code, which blocks gameplay on emulators. That's all I have, but we all know, and gamers know, that Denuvo is like one of the worst security
yes, and
security checks on games.
There's that episode of The Office where Dwight's hunting down the guy that flashed Phyllis in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'd rather 1,000 innocent men go to jail than one guilty man walk free. And that's exactly Denuvo. Like, Are we going to make 1,000 players have horrible experiences just so one pirate who's not going to buy the game can't pirate the game? Mm-hmm. You betcha. It's just like, okay, whatever. Denuvo, the narc of the games industry, everybody.
Yeah,
and they're not even good. They're not even like a good narc.
I think games even get
like a
review
joke.
bomb because they have Denuvo.
Yeah,
they do.
Well, because it does. Because there are games where it has performance issues, and also like, come on, this is Nintendo, and it's a lot of other companies, but it's like when politicians talk about kids. You don't give a shit about kids. Mm-hmm. You couldn't care less about children. American children, foreign children, it doesn't matter. You don't care.
Nintendo is the last person who needs any piracy protection anyways, because 40+ million copies of Mario Kart 8 sold will fucking tell you.
Piracy's not a problem. You just don't like that maybe you lose out on some money. You could care less if a small developer does bad opening, because it's not about that. It's about you just don't like, just with used game market back in the day, It's like you think it's an affront to your bottom line. And so you're just going to be opposed to it, because why be a company that takes a nuanced, complicated stance on things when you could just take a, no, we don't like it. That's
right. And also,
as complicated as that.
I know that piracy for new release Nintendo games does happen. However, the emulation side isn't really for new games.
No, not generally. Not generally.
Yeah.
And we could cycle through all the arguments. Like, people that are pirating the game, how often are they somebody that would have bought it any other way?
Right.
Mm-hmm. You have that argument. You have how complicated is it to emulate the game? It's not exactly easy all the time. You have that argument. So there's just, we've had this, it's like that scene in
Nintendo
StarCraft.
would have such an issue with game emulation if they did a better job preserving their games.
And there you go. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like that scene in StarCraft, and he's like, I know all about the Zerg. It's like, I know all about the stupid arguments that these companies make when talking about emulation and you know what? As Frank Cifaldi points out, Nintendo uses emulation, and they use the emulation that they use the copy of whatever Mario it was is definitely the copy that you just get off the internet.
Yeah,
so I don't want to hear
copy.
it. Don't hear it. Anyway, okay, sorry. Next one.
No, that's all right. This is a short one, and I can't give much context because you need images for it. But there's a Sonic statue that was in the Sega World location in London, like back in the 90s. The Sega had their own store. It's called Sega World. It was found in a warehouse, and it was beat to crap, and like his arm was broken off and everything, and of course he was worn out and everything. Well, they found this statue, it's an iconic statue, and they cleaned him up, they restored him, so he's looking pretty great now. He had his arm out. And
that's
everything.
Awesome! Hell yeah!
So I think it's at Yahoo.
Where are they gonna put it?
I don't know. There wasn't much. It was just like the announcement that they found it and restored it. They didn't give much info beyond that.
Maybe we can get it, set it in here.
Maybe, yeah.
You can just replace me on the show.
Yeah, the video shows where it was originally from, and then I think it shows a quick clip of them finding it. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
Oh, okay, fun.
User Illusion002 on Twitter has now used the power of the PS5 to improve PS4 games using a hacked PS5. Illusion has pushed some of the older PS4 games past their supposed limits. Several examples show that Gravity Rush 2 and Bloodborne have now reached 120 frames per second on the PS5 console, doing what some studios can't or won't do.
People, that's a golden idea. Is you just a Bloodborne remake sequel?
It's got to be a remake by now, man.
Yeah, you're right.
It's got to be a remake by now.
But considering, I don't know. You are right. It would have to be. It would just because every now
That's 10 years. Yeah, 2013.
Yeah, unless
13,
it was
14?
Unless it was like one of those weird things where like Horizon getting a remastered or whatever it was a couple years after it came out. You get weird things like that. But Connor got a note.
2015.
Yeah, 2015.
Really?
Yeah.
2015? That doesn't seem right, but okay.
Like I said, some of these stories are a little old, so I'm sorry. But Redfall's Steam player count is shockingly low. What? Surprising, right? No secret that Redfall was a massive disappointment this year. However, as of recording, Redfall is hanging on to around 20 players concurrently on Steam. It's tough to say if the game will come back from this low of number. Games have before. I know it's not a low, but like Cyberpunk's coming back. No Man's Sky came back. That was a big one too. But yeah, no roadmap or updates have been revealed since the release of the Xbox exclusive. However, Pete Hines, who's the head of Bethesda, insists that they have not given up and will keep working on Redfall to make improvements.
Okay.
Fate Grand Order, which is a mobile game based off a hit anime, has surpassed over 1 trillion yen in revenue. Sensor Tower reported that the mobile gacha game had reached worldwide revenue of $7 billion for us as mid-August 2023. They converted the rate with an exchange of around 147 yen to the American dollar, which concluded that the earnings are over 1 trillion yen. It's pretty sensational using trillion, but the conversion rates, but using the word trillion is very eye-catching. Yeah.
Remember, a billion is a lot more than you think.
And I'll tell you, I've played this game. It's not good.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
I mean, it's not that it's not, like, it's a very popular series over there, mostly in Japan, and it's a character collector game. But man, it was one of the worst giving free to play games I've ever played. Like, they don't give a shit. Like it's like you got to spend money on that game. Anyways, Dying Light 2 maybe could have been great. Insider Gaming is reporting that a Dying Light 2 community member named Sneed thought it'd be a good idea to compile every ounce of cut content from the game into one document. By the time they had finished, the results sat in the form of a 231-page document covering everything from cut factions, quests, dialogues, regions, and weapons. Full quest lines and major factions and even regions were cut from the game that were already mostly or almost developed. It's not terribly surprising. However, people point out the consistent knocking out of the character in the main game in order to change the set pieces or take you from point A to point B, and the context is all weird and out of whack. So people are like, "Oh, this is probably what's been going on." And then the original writer, Chris Avallone, I think was his name.
Yes.
Got ousted because of
Me Too stuff.
Right, which supposedly was proven false later on. So they lost their main writer and whatnot. But
I don't know a whole lot of context.
I don't know the context either, so I'll just state that.
You may have to Google that on your own.
But yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse, youtube.com/The Gaming Discourse. Do we have a new episode of Gaming Discourse?
Yeah, we had one last week, and we will have one this week.
Did we have one last week?
Yeah, it was a silent episode. I called it a silent episode. There was no commentary or anything. It was just...
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, we'll have a new one this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.